I used to think that the sound of my own happiness was selfish, a discordant note in the beautiful harmony of everyone else's needs. For years, I was the quiet soil that let everyone else bloom, telling myself that my purpose was to be the foundation, the support system. I watered their gardens, pruned their leaves, and celebrated their colors, all while my own dreams wilted on the vine. I didn't realize that by making myself small, by constantly saying yes to others, I was whispering no to the one person who needed me most.
That quiet no to oneself is a feeling so many of us know. It's the silent price of being agreeable, of being the good daughter, partner, or friend. Today, we're honored to share the story of Maya Lin from Chicago, Illinois, a woman who learned to find her own voice amongst the noise of expectation. I'm your host, Susan Bentley, and this is Unbroken Women, where we celebrate the journey back to ourselves.
My life from the outside was perfect, orderly. I lived with my long-term partner, Liam, in a clean, minimalist apartment in Chicago where the throw pillows were always perfectly fluffed. My days had a rhythm that was comforting in its predictability. I'd wake up before the sun, the cool wood of the floorboards under my feet, and make coffee. Not for me, I prefer tea, but for Liam. The rich, bitter smell of his dark roast was the official start of my day. I worked as an administrative assistant, a job I was good at because it was all about organization and anticipating other people's needs. I was the office go-to, the one who remembered birthdays, the one who stayed late to fix a printer jam. My friends called me reliable. My family called me sweet. And I was. I was a collection of positive adjectives that belonged to everyone but me. My own dream, my deep, secret love for floral design, was relegated to the margins. It lived on a Pinterest board I only looked at late at night, and in the small, cheap bouquets I'd buy from the grocery store and rearrange in my kitchen when no one was home. It was a secret garden, tended in stolen moments, a place where I almost, but not quite, felt like myself.
This constant accommodation was a weight. It wasn't a sudden burden. It was a slow, creeping pressure that had been building for years. It felt like walking around with a perfectly tailored but too tight coat on at all times. It looked fine, but I could never take a full, deep breath. Inside, there was a constant low-grade hum of anxiety. A mental checklist that never ended, filled with everyone else's appointments, preferences, and emotional states. I was constantly scanning rooms, reading faces, trying to predict what someone needed before they even knew it themselves. I became a mirror, reflecting back whatever version of myself the person in front of me wanted to see. The supportive girlfriend, the easygoing friend, the diligent employee. The act was so seamless, so practiced that I started to forget what was behind the reflection. The weight wasn't just emotional, it was physical. My shoulders were always tight, my jaw was always clenched. I was shrinking, making myself smaller to take up less space, to be less of a bother, until I felt almost invisible. The first cracks were tiny, almost unnoticeable. One afternoon, I was walking past a small storefront with a for lease sign in the window. The glass was dusty, but the sunlight hit it just right, and for a split second, I saw it. I saw my own little floral shop. I could almost smell it, the damp, earthy scent of moss and soil, the sweet perfume of freesia and gardenias. I pictured buckets of fresh stems, ribbons in every color, and a little bell that would jingle when the door opened. The fantasy was so vivid, so complete, it stole my breath. And then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a wave of guilt. How could I even think of something so frivolous, so risky?
Liam was saving for a down payment on a house. My parents were proud of my stable job. A flower shop? It was a daydream, a child's fantasy. I pushed the thought down, buried it under a pile of practicalities and responsibilities. But the image lingered. It became a little whisper in the quiet moments, a question that I refused to answer. Is this all there is? The universe, I think, eventually gets tired of whispering. Sometimes it has to shout. For me, the shout came in the form of a floral workshop. It wasn't just any workshop. It was a 3-day intensive with a world-renowned designer, someone whose work I had studied and idolized for years. It was expensive, and it was a long shot, but I'd saved up for months in secret. When I got the acceptance email, my hands were shaking. It felt like the first real, tangible step toward my secret Arden. The workshop was 2 weeks away. Then my friend Sarah called, hysterical. Her trip to Mexico was in jeopardy. Her dog sitter had canceled last minute. The dates were the exact 3 days of the workshop. I could hear the silent question hanging in her panicked voice. My stomach twisted. I opened my mouth to explain, to say I couldn't, but the old programming took over. The desire to be the rescuer, the reliable one. "Don't worry," I heard myself say. "I'll do it." The relief in her voice was a punch in the gut. I canceled my spot, sacrificing my deposit. The next day, I got a text from her. "Good news! My mom can take Frankie after all. Trip is back on. You're a lifesaver." I just stared at the text. Then, on autopilot, I went to the workshop website, a sliver of desperate hope in my chest. And there it was, in big red letters. Workshop full. That's when the floor fell out. My vision tunneled. The air in my lungs turned to glass. I couldn't breathe. I slid down the kitchen wall, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought they would crack. It wasn't about the workshop anymore. It was about the fact that I had, with my own hands, given my dream away for nothing. And nobody even noticed. After the panic subsided, leaving me shaky and hollowed out, the denial rushed in to fill the void. I told myself I was overreacting. It's just a class. There'll be others. I cleaned the apartment with a frantic energy, scrubbing countertops until they gleamed, trying to impose order on my surroundings because my inner world was in absolute chaos. I tried to push the feeling down, to bury it under layers of logic, but it was no use. The truth was now a living thing inside me, and it was terrifying. What if I started saying no? What would happen? I pictured Liam's confused face, my friend's disappointment, my family's concern. My entire identity was built on being the one who said yes. Who would I be without that? The fear was a cold, physical presence. It was the fear of being disliked, the fear of being seen as selfish, the fear of conflict. But underneath it all was the most terrifying thought of all, the fear of being alone. If I wasn't useful, if I wasn't accommodating, would anyone stick around? I had built my life on the foundation of my own disappearance, and I was terrified that if I started to show up, everyone else would leave. The breaking point didn't come with a bang. It came with a profound, soul-crushing silence. A few nights after the workshop incident, Liam came home and casually mentioned he'd invited his boss and his wife over for dinner on Saturday. He needed me to work my magic. He said it with a smile, a pat on my arm, completely oblivious to the war raging inside me. I just nodded. I spent the next day planning the menu, making a shopping list, scheduling the cleaning. And that evening, I found myself standing in the middle of our living room, list in hand, and I just stopped. I couldn't move. It was the sheer, unbearable weight of one more request, one more performance. I walked into our bedroom closet, closed the door, and slid down to the floor in the dark. I was surrounded by the soft, muffled textures of clothes I'd bought to fit a life that wasn't mine. And I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. Not at first. I just sat there,
suffocated by the silence and the scent of cedar and fabric softener. A deep, bottomless exhaustion washed over me. It was the exhaustion of 1,000 tiny concessions, 1,000,000 bitten tongues, a lifetime of putting myself last. And in that darkness, I knew I couldn't do it anymore, not for one more day. The dam finally broke and the tears came, silent, hot, and endless. It was the sound of a spirit completely giving out. In the aftermath of that collapse, something shifted. The exhaustion gave way to a strange, terrifying clarity. As I sat there on the closet floor with mascara staining my cheeks, a single thought rose up from the wreckage. No more. It wasn't an angry thought. It was quiet, solid, and absolute. It was the calmest I had felt in years. I was going to stop. I was going to stop abandoning myself for the comfort of others. I didn't know what that meant. I had no plan. I had no idea how to even begin. But the decision was made. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, the life I knew behind me and a vast, empty, unknown space in front of me. Choosing to jump felt less like an act of courage and more like an act of survival. Because I finally understood that staying on that cliff, continuing to live that way, was no longer an option. It was a slow, quiet death. And for the first time, I chose to live. The first test came 2 days later. It was small, almost insignificant. A coworker, Mark, approached my desk at 5 o'clock. "Hey Maya, you're a lifesaver. I completely forgot I have a date tonight. Any chance you could finish up this report for me? It's due tomorrow morning." The old me would have said yes before he even finished the sentence. I could feel the word forming on my tongue, the familiar, easy path of accommodation. My heart started to pound. My palms got sweaty. I took a breath, a small one. Then I looked at him, made eye contact, and said, "I'm sorry, Mark. I can't. I have plans tonight." He blinked, genuinely surprised. "Oh, okay." He stood there for a second, then just walked away. The world didn't end. There was no confrontation. But for me, it was an earthquake. I had said no. My plans were to go home and sit in silence, but they were my plans. A tiny pocket of time that I had claimed for myself. As I packed my bag and walked out of the office, I felt a dizzying mix of terror and exhilaration. The air on the street felt different, sharper. I had drawn a line, a very small, wobbly line, but it was mine. People don't like it when you change the script. My small acts of self-preservation were met with a wall of subtle and not-so-subtle resistance. When I told Liam I wouldn't be going to his brother's for a barbecue because I was signing up for a weekend pottery class, something just for me, he looked at me with genuine confusion. "But you always go. My mom is making her potato salad." The unspoken message was clear. Your desires are an inconvenience to our routine. My friends started making little passive-aggressive comments. "Oh, can't make it? Right, Maya's too busy for us now." They weren't being cruel. They were just used to my unconditional availability. I was a utility, and suddenly I was malfunctioning. The worst of it came from Liam. After I declined 3 social events in a row to work on my floral design portfolio, he sat me down on the couch. The air was thick with his disappointment. He was quiet for a long time, and then he said the words that almost broke me. "I don't know who you are anymore, Maya. You're not the same woman I fell in love with." Each word was a perfectly aimed dart. He wasn't yelling. He was just stating it as a fact. The woman he loved was accommodating. She was easy. She put him first. And he was right. I wasn't her anymore. And in his eyes, that made me a stranger.
His words echoed in my head for days. The loneliness was a physical ache. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, the space between Liam and me in the bed feeling like a vast, cold ocean. The guilt was immense. Was I being selfish? Had I become cold and unfeeling? Every fiber of my being screamed at me to apologize, to go back. It would be so easy to just smooth things over, to cancel the class, to go to the next dinner party, to become the nice Maya again. The comfort of that familiar role was a siren song. At least when I was that person, people smiled at me. At least I wasn't alone. I felt utterly lost, adrift without the compass of other people's approval. I was fighting a war on two fronts, against the expectations of everyone around me and against the deeply ingrained programming inside my own head. The lowest point came on a Tuesday. I was driving home from work, and Liam's words, "You're not the woman I fell in love with," were on a loop in my mind. I pulled over to the side of the road, unable to see through my tears. I felt like I had ruined everything. I had traded a life of comfortable, predictable love for what? Loneliness? Disapproval? I scrolled through the photos on my phone, looking at picture after picture of the old me smiling next to Liam, surrounded by friends. I looked happy. Maybe I was happy, and I had just been too stupid to realize it. The thought of giving up was more than a temptation. It felt like a relief. I could go home, I could apologize, I could tell him he was right. I could promise to be better, to be the person he needed. The fight had gone out of me. I was exhausted, heartbroken, and completely, utterly convinced I had made a terrible mistake. Surrender was a breath away. I was ready to let the tide pull me back. I eventually went home, defeated. I was rummaging through a box in the back of my closet looking for an old photo album, maybe to remind myself of the good times I had destroyed. My fingers brushed against something hard-bound and dusty. It was a journal from when I was 16. The cover was faded purple, covered in doodles. I almost tossed it aside, but something made me open it. I flipped through pages of teenage angst and song lyrics until one entry, written in messy, looping cursive, caught my eye. It was about choosing a college major. Everyone was pushing me toward business, but I wanted to study art. At the bottom of the page, in big underlined letters, my younger self had written a question. What if I made myself happy first? Reading those words, it was like a lightning bolt. The simple, innocent, profound wisdom of a 16-year-old girl who hadn't yet learned to silence her own desires. She hadn't learned to be practical or accommodating. She just wanted to be happy. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't betray her. I couldn't let her down. That night, I didn't apologize to Liam. We had a long, hard conversation. I didn't blame him. I explained what was happening inside of me. It was the start of a difficult road, one that eventually led to us parting ways. Not with anger, but with a sad understanding that we wanted different things. The climb back was slow. It was one small, intentional step after another. I enrolled in a local floral design course. I started a blog to document my creations. I started saying no without the long, apologetic explanations. And I started saying yes to myself. Yes to a quiet evening with a book. Yes to spending a little extra on beautiful, rare flowers just for me. Yes to turning off my phone and just being. I began to set boundaries not as walls to keep people out, but as fences to protect the sacred ground of my own well-being. Some friends drifted away, but others leaned in, curious and supportive. I was building a new life, stem by stem.
Today, when I look in the mirror, I don't see a reflection of someone else's expectations. I see me. My eyes aren't as tired. I wear brighter colors. My ponytail is gone, replaced by a haircut I chose just because I liked it. I'm not a people pleaser anymore. I'm just a person who is pleased with herself. I am still kind, I am still loving, but my kindness now comes from a place of fullness, not from a place of deficit. It is a choice, not an obligation. I am finally tending my own garden. It's not perfect, it's a little wild, but it is bursting with life. It is mine, and the peace that comes from that is something I never knew was possible.
If I could speak to that girl in the closet, the one drowning in silence, I would tell her this: your worth is not measured by your usefulness to others. Your dreams are not an inconvenience. Your happiness is not a price you have to pay for someone else's comfort. I see you. I see how tired you are. And I want you to know it is okay to put down the weight. It is okay to choose yourself. The flowers you were always meant to grow were for you all along.
Thank you, Maya, for sharing your beautiful, vulnerable, and incredibly powerful story of blossoming. Maya's journey reminds us that our own well-being is not a selfish pursuit. It's a necessary one. If her story resonated with you, please share your own experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Unbroken Women, and click here to watch another story of a woman who found her strength in the most unexpected of places.